There is a secret power that moves through every human interaction, a force so subtle yet so commanding that it shapes destinies, builds empires, and transforms lives without a single harsh word ever being spoken. This is the power of true influence, and it operates not through force or manipulation, but through the gentle art of understanding the human heart. Most people believe that influence requires pressure, that persuasion demands confrontation, that to change minds you must first break walls. But this is the greatest misconception of our time. The masters of influence know a different truth. They understand that the strongest fortress in the world is not built of stone and steel, but of trust and genuine connection. When you learn to approach this fortress not as a conqueror but as a friend, its gates open willingly, and what seemed impossible becomes inevitable. The art of influence begins with a simple recognition that every person you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about, carrying dreams you cannot see, and harboring fears they may never voice. When you truly grasp this fundamental truth about human nature, everything changes. You stop trying to impose your will and start discovering what others truly want. You cease being a salesman, pushing a product, and become a problem solver offering solutions. You transform from someone who argues points to someone who builds bridges. This transformation is not just philosophical, it is deeply practical, because influence that lasts is never built on clever tricks or psychological manipulation. It is constructed on the bedrock of authentic care for the welfare of others. Consider for a moment the people in your life who have most influenced you. Were they the ones who shouted the loudest, who pressured you the most, who made the strongest demands? Or were they the quiet ones who listened deeply, who understood your struggles, who believed in your potential, even when you could not see it yourself? The answer reveals the first great principle of influence without force. People are not convinced by what you say about your ideas. They are convinced by what your ideas can do for them. But here is the crucial distinction that separates true influence from mere manipulation. The manipulator asks, "What can I get from this person?" while the influencer asks, "What can I give to this person?" This difference in approach creates entirely different results. The manipulator may achieve short-term compliance, but the influencer creates long-term commitment. The manipulator builds resentment that eventually erupts, but the influencer builds loyalty that endures through difficulties. Think about the last time someone tried to force you to do something against your natural inclination. Remember how every fiber of your being resisted, how you looked for ways to avoid or undermine their demands, how even when you complied outwardly, you harbored resentment inwardly. This is the inevitable result of forced persuasion. It creates the appearance of success while sowing the seeds of future rebellion. Now contrast that with a time when someone helped you see how a particular action would benefit you, when they made you feel heard and understood, when they respected your autonomy while showing you new possibilities. The difference in your response was dramatic, wasn't it? This is the power of influence without force. It works with human nature instead of against it, creating willing partnership instead of grudging compliance. The foundation of lasting influence rests on three pillars that every person can develop, regardless of their background, education, or natural charisma. The first pillar is deep listening. Not the kind of surface listening where you wait for your turn to speak, but the profound listening where you seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Most people listen with the intent to reply, but influential people listen with the intent to comprehend. They listen not just to words, but to emotions, not just to statements, but to the stories behind the statements. When someone feels truly heard, something magical happens in their nervous system. Their defenses lower, their receptivity increases, and they become naturally inclined to reciprocate the gift of attention you have given them. This is not a manipulation technique. It is a human truth, as old as civilization itself. We influence others, not by talking more, but by listening better. When you listen deeply, you discover the real concerns beneath surface objections, the hidden motivations behind stated positions, the dreams and fears that drive behavior. Armed with this understanding, you can speak to what really matters to people, rather than what you think should matter to them. This distinction transforms every conversation from a battle of wills into a collaborative exploration of possibilities. Deep listening requires practice because it goes against our natural self-centered tendencies. We are wired to focus on our own needs, our own perspectives, our own agendas. Training yourself to genuinely focus on another person's world requires conscious effort and constant vigilance. You must learn to quiet the voice in your head that is preparing your rebuttal while the other person is still speaking. You must resist the urge to interrupt with your own examples and experiences. You must discipline yourself to ask clarifying questions instead of making assumptions about what people mean. Developing authentic empathy begins with recognizing that every person's behavior makes sense to them given their background, experiences, and current circumstances. The colleague who seems unreasonably resistant to change may have been burned by previous change initiatives that promised much and delivered little. The customer who appears irrationally price sensitive may be operating under financial pressures. You cannot see the family member who seems stubbornly closed-minded may be protecting beliefs that have served them well in difficult times. When you understand the logic behind seemingly illogical behavior, you can address the real concerns instead of fighting the surface symptoms. Empathy also requires emotional intelligence, the ability to read and respond appropriately to the emotional undercurrents in every interaction. People make decisions with their emotions and then justify them with logic. If you try to influence someone who is emotionally upset with pure logic, you will fail because you are speaking to the wrong part of their brain. The emotional brain must be addressed first. Acknowledgement, validation, and understanding must precede any attempt at logical persuasion. This is why the most influential people are often those who can make others feel understood and valued, even in disagreement. The practice of empathy also protects you from one of the greatest pitfalls in influence attempts, the assumption that what motivates you will motivate everyone else. This assumption leads to influence strategies that work well with people who think like you, but fail miserably with people who have different values, priorities, and decision-making processes. When you truly understand another person's perspective, you can tailor your approach to their specific motivations and concerns rather than projecting your own onto them. The third pillar is genuine value creation, which means always asking how you can make life better for the person you are attempting to influence. This requires a fundamental shift in thinking from what can I get to what can I give. When your primary motivation is to serve others, influence becomes a natural byproduct rather than a forced outcome. People can sense your intentions even when you never speak them directly. They know instinctively whether you are there to take from them or to contribute to them. This internal knowing shapes their response to everything you say and do. When your intent is pure, when your desire is truly to help, resistance melts away and cooperation emerges naturally. Value creation goes beyond simply offering benefits or advantages. It means understanding what constitutes real value in another person's world and then finding ways to deliver that value through your proposal or request. For some people, value means financial gain or business advantage. For others, it means security, recognition, convenience, or peace of mind. For still others, value might mean learning opportunities, social connection, or the chance to make a meaningful contribution. The skilled influencer learns to identify what each person values most and then demonstrates how their proposal serves those specific values. This approach requires patience and creativity because the value you offer may not be immediately obvious or directly related to your request. Sometimes the value is in the process itself, the way you involve people in decision-making, the respect you show for their expertise, the opportunity you provide for them to contribute their ideas. Sometimes the value is in the relationship benefits, the connections you help them make, the reputation enhancement that comes from being associated with your project, the personal growth opportunities embedded in what you are asking them to do. The most sophisticated form of value creation involves helping people achieve goals they care about more than the specific thing you are requesting. When you can show someone how saying yes to your request will help them get closer to something they want even more, influence becomes effortless. This requires deep knowledge of their aspirations, challenges, and priorities. It means investing time in understanding their world before you ask them to be part of yours. But understanding these pillars is only the beginning. The real art of influence lies in how you combine them in the flowing dance of human interaction. Every conversation becomes an opportunity to practice these principles. Every disagreement becomes a chance to build deeper understanding. Every conflict becomes a possibility for creating stronger connection. The skilled influencer learns to read the emotional temperature of every interaction and adjust their approach accordingly. When someone is angry, they know that logic will not penetrate until the emotion has been acknowledged and honored. When someone is fearful, they understand that reassurance must come before any request for action. When someone is confused, they recognize that clarity must be provided before commitment can be expected. This emotional intelligence transforms ordinary conversations into extraordinary opportunities for mutual understanding and benefit. It allows you to navigate the complex terrain of human feelings with grace and effectiveness. You learn to sense when someone is ready to hear new ideas and when they need more time to process. You develop the ability to detect hidden concerns that are driving resistance and address them directly rather than fighting the symptoms. You become skilled at creating emotional safety that allows people to consider new possibilities without feeling threatened or diminished. One of the greatest mistakes people make when trying to influence others is assuming that what motivates them will motivate everyone else. But humans are beautifully diverse in what drives them. Some people are motivated by achievement and recognition, others by security and stability. Some are inspired by adventure and novelty, others by tradition and familiarity. Some are driven by the desire to help others, while some are motivated by personal advancement. The master of influence learns to identify what truly matters to each individual and speaks to those specific values and desires. This is not manipulation because you are not changing what they want. You are simply showing them how what you propose can help them achieve what they already want. This alignment of interests creates win-win situations where influence becomes effortless because everyone benefits. The art lies in discovering these natural alignments rather than trying to force artificial ones. Sometimes this requires creative thinking and innovative approaches. The solution that serves your goals and theirs may not be the obvious one. It may require combining resources, adjusting timelines, modifying scope, or finding entirely new ways to achieve the desired outcomes. The process of discovering these alignments often reveals opportunities that neither party initially considered. When you approach influence as a collaborative problem-solving exercise rather than a competitive battle, unexpected possibilities emerge. The customer who seemed impossible to please may reveal needs that you can uniquely address. The colleague who appeared hopelessly opposed to your proposal may suggest modifications that make it better than your original idea. The family member who seemed determined to resist your plans may offer insights that lead to solutions that work for everyone. The art also requires patience, a virtue that our rapid-fire world often forgets. That true influence is like planting a garden, not microwaving a meal. Seeds of ideas need time to germinate. Relationships need time to develop trust, and people need time to process change. When you rush the process, you often destroy the very thing you are trying to create. The person who plants seeds in the spring and expects fruit the next week will be disappointed. But the person who plants with patience and tends with care will harvest abundantly when the time is right. This patience is not passive waiting. It is active nurturing of the relationship and the ideas you have planted. Just as a gardener does not abandon their plants after planting, but continues to water and weed and tend them, the influential person continues to invest in relationships and follow up on conversations and check in on the progress of shared ideas. They understand that influence is often a series of small interactions over time, rather than a single dramatic moment of persuasion. Patience also means accepting that some people may never be ready for what you have to offer, and that is perfectly acceptable. Not every seed planted will grow. Not every relationship will develop into partnership. Not every influence attempt will succeed. The wise gardener plants many seeds, knowing that some will not germinate. The skilled influencer engages with many people, knowing that not all will be receptive. This acceptance prevents the frustration and desperation that often sabotage influence attempts. When you are not attached to any particular outcome, when you can maintain your equilibrium regardless of individual responses, you become more attractive and more influential to those who are ready to be influenced. The art also requires patience, a virtue that our rapid-fire world often forgets. That true influence is like planting a garden, not microwaving a meal. Seeds of ideas need time to germinate. Relationships need time to develop trust, and people need time to process change. When you rush the process, you often destroy the very thing you are trying to create. The person who plants seeds in the spring and expects fruit the next week will be disappointed. But the person who plants with patience and tends with care will harvest abundantly when the time is right. This patience is not passive waiting. It is active nurturing of the relationship and the ideas you have planted. Just as a gardener does not abandon their plants after planting, but continues to water and weed and tend them, the influential person continues to invest in relationships and follow up on conversations and check in on the progress of shared ideas. They understand that influence is often a series of small interactions over time, rather than a single dramatic moment of persuasion. Patience also means accepting that some people may never be ready for what you have to offer, and that is perfectly acceptable. Not every seed planted will grow. Not every relationship will develop into partnership. Not every influence attempt will succeed. The wise gardener plants many seeds, knowing that some will not germinate. The skilled influencer engages with many people, knowing that not all will be receptive. This acceptance prevents the frustration and desperation that often sabotage influence attempts. When you are not attached to any particular outcome, when you can maintain your equilibrium regardless of individual responses, you become more attractive and more influential to those who are ready to be influenced. I just think saying, required for there are seasons in every person's life when they are open to new ideas and seasons when they are focused on other priorities. There are moments when they are receptive to change and moments when they need stability. The influential person learns to recognize these seasons and adjust their approach accordingly. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is wait for the right moment rather than forcing the wrong one. Another crucial element of influence without force is the power of questions rather than statements. Questions create curiosity where statements create resistance. When you tell someone what to think, their natural response is often to defend their existing position. But when you ask them thoughtful questions that lead them to discover new perspectives on their own, they feel ownership of the insights they uncover. The conclusion they reach themselves is always more powerful than the conclusion you try to force upon them. Master influencers become experts at asking questions that guide people toward beneficial realizations while allowing them to maintain their dignity and autonomy. What do you think would happen if we tried this approach? How do you see this benefiting your team? What obstacles do you anticipate, and how might we address them together? These kinds of questions engage people as partners in problem-solving rather than targets for persuasion. The difference in response is remarkable. People who might resist direct suggestions often embrace solutions they help create. This collaborative approach to influence honors human nature instead of fighting against it. We all have a deep need to feel valued, respected, and included in decisions that affect us. When influence attempts honor these needs, success becomes much more likely and much more sustainable. The person who feels like a partner in creating solutions is much more committed to implementing them than the person who feels like a passive recipient of someone else's decisions. The art of asking powerful questions requires skill and practice. The questions must be genuine, not leading or manipulative. They must come from real curiosity about the other person's perspective, not from a desire to trap them into agreeing with you. The best questions open up new thinking rather than closing down possibilities. They invite exploration rather than demanding specific answers. They create space for creativity and innovation rather than forcing predetermined conclusions. Learning to ask these kinds of questions often requires unlearning habits of telling and directing that many people develop in positions of authority or expertise. It requires humility to acknowledge that others may have insights and ideas that you have not considered. It requires confidence to engage in open-ended conversations without knowing exactly where they will lead. But the rewards of this approach are enormous. Not only do you become more influential, you also learn more, create better solutions, and build stronger relationships. The timing of influence attempts is equally important. There are moments when people are open to new ideas and moments when they are closed. The wise influencer learns to recognize these moments and respond accordingly. Trying to influence someone when the seeds may be good, but the soil is not ready to receive them. Better to wait for the right moment when the person is relaxed, focused, and emotionally available. This might mean having the conversation tomorrow instead of today, or it might mean addressing their emotional state before presenting your ideas. Sometimes the most influential thing you can do is simply say, "I can see this is not a good time for this conversation. When would work better for you?" This respect for their readiness often creates more influence than any brilliant argument could achieve. It demonstrates that you care more about effective communication than about your own convenience or timeline. Reading the signs of readiness becomes easier with practice and attention. People who are ready to be influenced typically make eye contact, ask questions, lean forward, and engage actively in the conversation. People who are not ready often avoid eye contact, give short answers, check their phone, or show other signs of distraction or resistance. Learning to read these signals and respond appropriately is a crucial skill for anyone who wants to influence without force. Sometimes people are not ready because they lack necessary information or context. Sometimes they are not ready because they are dealing with other priorities or pressures. Sometimes they are not ready because they do not yet trust you or your motives. The skilled influencer learns to diagnose what is preventing readiness and address those specific barriers rather than pushing forward regardless of the obstacles. The language you choose carries tremendous power in influence situations. Words are not just vehicles for information, they are emotional experiences that create feelings and associations in the listener's mind. The difference between saying "you're wrong" and saying "I see it differently" can determine whether someone becomes defensive or curious. The difference between saying "you have to do this" and saying "would you consider trying this" can mean the difference between resistance and cooperation. Influential people learn to speak in ways that preserve dignity, create safety, and inspire action. They avoid language that triggers defensiveness and choose words that open possibilities. Instead of saying "that will never work," they might say "what challenges do you see with that approach?" Instead of saying "you always do this," they might say "I've noticed a pattern and I'm wondering if you see it too." These subtle shifts in language create massive shifts in how messages are received and processed. The principle behind this careful word choice is simple but profound. People will always defend themselves against attack, but they will often cooperate with assistance. When your language feels like an attack on their competence, character, or choices, their natural response is to defend and resist. But when your language feels like an offer to help them succeed, their natural response is to engage and consider. This is not about being manipulative with words, it is about being thoughtful with them. It is choosing to communicate in ways that serve both your goals and their dignity. The power of language extends beyond individual word choices to the overall tone and style of communication. Influential people tend to speak with certainty about facts and with curiosity about opinions. They make strong statements about what they know to be true and ask exploratory questions about areas where perspectives may differ. This combination creates credibility without arrogance, confidence without closed-mindedness. They also learn to use inclusive language that creates a sense of shared ownership and mutual investment. Instead of saying my idea or my proposal, they learn to say our opportunity or what we might consider. Instead of saying if you do this, they say when we implement this approach. These subtle linguistic shifts create psychological ownership and shared commitment before any formal agreement is reached. The skilled influencer also learns to speak in terms of benefits rather than features, outcomes rather than processes, and possibilities rather than problems. Instead of describing what something is, they describe what it does for people. Instead of explaining how something works, they paint pictures of what life will be like when it is working. Instead of focusing on current difficulties, they help people envision improved futures. This forward-looking, benefit-focused language naturally creates enthusiasm and motivation. Another dimension of influence without force involves understanding and working with human psychology rather than against it. People have predictable patterns in how they think, feel, and decide. When you understand these patterns, you can present your ideas in ways that align with natural human tendencies rather than fighting them. With the resting temps, influence people come in. Instead of saying you must do this, offering choices creates a sense of control and autonomy. Would you prefer to start with option A or option B? Both options may lead to the same outcome you desire, but by providing choice, you honor their need to feel in control of their decisions. People also respond better to reasons than to demands. The simple word because has been shown to dramatically increase compliance with requests. This happens because humans are naturally curious about causation. We want to understand why something is important or necessary. When you provide reasons, even simple ones, you satisfy this natural curiosity and make cooperation more likely. Instead of saying, please send me that report, you might say, please send me that report because I need it for tomorrow's meeting with the client. The addition of because transforms a demand into a reasonable request. Human beings also have a powerful need for consistency between their actions and their stated beliefs and values. When you can show someone how your request aligns with their expressed values, influence becomes much easier. If someone has told you they value innovation, you can frame your proposal in terms of how innovative it is. If they pride themselves on customer service, you can emphasize how your idea will improve the customer experience. This is not manipulation if your proposal genuinely does serve these values. It is simply smart communication that speaks to what already matters to them. But the psychology of influence also involves understanding the power of social proof. People are naturally influenced by what others in their reference group are thinking and doing. When you can demonstrate that respected peers or similar organizations have embraced your idea, it becomes much more attractive to your target. This is why testimonials and case studies are so powerful in influence situations. They provide social proof that reduces the perceived risk of saying yes to your proposal. However, social proof must be used carefully and authentically. People can usually detect when you are manufacturing fake consensus or manipulating social pressure. The most powerful social proof comes from genuine examples of people who have benefited from what you are proposing. When you can tell real stories about real results achieved by real people, the influence is both ethical and effective. Understanding reciprocity is another crucial psychological principle. People feel obligated to return favors and respond positively to those who have helped them. This is why building a track record of helpfulness and generosity creates a foundation for future influence. When you have consistently added value to someone's life, they become naturally inclined to help you when you need it. This reciprocity must be genuine and without strings attached to be effective. People can sense when favors come with hidden obligations, and this creates resistance rather than cooperation. The principle of commitment and consistency also plays a powerful role in influence. When people make public commitments or write down their intentions, they become much more likely to follow through. This is why getting people to articulate their own reasons for agreeing with your proposal is more powerful than telling them why they should agree. When they state the benefits in their own words, they become committed to that position in a way that external pressure could never achieve. Scarcity and urgency can also be powerful psychological motivators, but they must be used ethically. Creating artificial scarcity or false urgency is manipulation that will eventually backfire. However, when genuine scarcity or time constraints exist, it is appropriate to make people aware of them. The key is honesty and authenticity. If there really are limited opportunities or time constraints, people have a right to know so they can make informed decisions. However, the most sustainable form of influence comes not from clever psychological techniques, but from building genuine relationships based on mutual respect and shared benefit. When people trust you, when they believe you have their best interests at heart, when they see evidence that you deliver on your promises, influence becomes effortless. They begin to seek your opinion rather than resist it. They start to implement your suggestions before you even finish making them. They become advocates for your ideas rather than obstacles to them. This transformation from resistance to partnership is the ultimate goal of influence without force. It represents a shift from transactional interactions to relational connections. Instead of trying to get something from each encounter, you focus on building something through the relationship. This long-term perspective changes everything about how you approach influence opportunities. Building this kind of relationship-based influence requires consistency over time. You cannot be genuinely helpful one day and selfishly manipulative the next and expect to maintain trust. You cannot listen deeply in one conversation and ignore completely in the next and expect to keep credibility. Influence without force is not a technique you turn on and off. It is a way of being that you commit to consistently. This consistency builds a reputation that precedes you into every new relationship and conversation. People begin to expect good things from their interactions with you because you have delivered good things consistently in the past. They approach conversations with you in a spirit of openness and collaboration because experience has taught them that you will honor their perspectives and serve their interests. This reputation becomes one of your most valuable assets, opening doors and creating opportunities that would be impossible to achieve through force or manipulation. The development of this reputation requires patience because it is built through many small interactions over time rather than through dramatic gestures or major events. Each conversation is an opportunity to make deposits in the trust account you maintain with every person in your network. Each interaction either strengthens or weakens the foundation of future influence. This perspective helps you take every encounter seriously, not because each one is crucial in itself, but because each one contributes to the larger pattern that defines your reputation. The art of influence also requires understanding that different situations call for different approaches. Influencing a colleague is different from influencing a customer, which is different from influencing your family members. The principles remain the same, but the application varies based on the relationship, the context, and the stakes involved. In business settings, people often respond well to data, logic, and clear benefits. In personal relationships, emotion and connection may be more important than facts and figures. In crisis situations, people need reassurance and direction. In creative environments, they may respond better to inspiration and possibility. The skilled influencer develops sensitivity to these contextual differences and adjusts their approach accordingly. They learn to read the room, to sense what kind of influence is needed in each situation, and to respond appropriately. This adaptability, combined with consistent principles, creates a powerful combination that works across many different scenarios and relationships. It requires developing a repertoire of approaches while maintaining core values and commitments. In professional settings, influence often requires understanding organizational dynamics, political realities, and business pressures that may not be immediately visible. The proposal that makes perfect logical sense may fail. The proposal that makes perfect logical sense may fail because it threatens someone's territory or contradicts unstated organizational priorities. They understand that influence in organizations often requires coalition building, stakeholder management, and careful timing in personal relationships. Influence must be balanced with love, respect, and acceptance. You cannot manipulate people you care about without damaging the relationship. Even if the manipulation succeeds in the short term, family members and close friends have a right to make their own choices, even when you believe those choices are mistaken. The art lies in offering your perspective and support while respecting their autonomy and dignity. Sometimes the most influential thing you can do is love someone enough to let them make their own decisions and learn from their own experiences. In crisis situations, people need different kinds of influence than they need in normal circumstances. During emergencies or high-stress situations, people often need clear direction more than collaborative exploration. They may need reassurance more than options. They may need immediate action more than lengthy discussion. The influential person learns to recognize these special circumstances and adjust their approach while still honoring the basic principles of respect and dignity. One of the most powerful forms of influence is example. When people see you living according to the principles you advocate, when they witness the positive results of the approaches you suggest, when they observe your character in action, they become naturally inclined to follow your lead. This influence through example is particularly powerful because it feels completely voluntary to the person being influenced. They are not being pressured or persuaded. They are being inspired. They see something in your behavior that they want to emulate, and they choose to adopt similar approaches in their own lives. This type of influence creates deep and lasting change because it comes from within rather than being imposed from without. The person who changes because of your example feels empowered rather than controlled. They credit themselves for the positive changes rather than feeling indebted to you. This creates a healthy dynamic that strengthens rather than strains relationships. The challenge with influence through example is it requires you to actually become the kind of person you want others to become. You cannot fake authenticity for very long. People will eventually see through pretense and performance. But when your example is genuine, when it reflects your real values and commitments, it becomes extraordinarily persuasive. People can sense authenticity, and they are naturally drawn to it. In a world full of manipulation and spin, genuine authenticity stands out like a beacon and attracts people who are hungry for something real. This authentic influence also has the advantage of feeling good to both the influencer and the influenced. There is no guilt, no manipulation, no hidden agenda. There is simply one person living well and inspiring others to do the same. This creates positive energy that strengthens rather than drains relationships. The influenced person feels grateful rather than resentful, empowered rather than controlled. They become partners in positive change rather than victims of manipulation. The ripple effects of this kind of influence extend far beyond the immediate relationship. When you influence someone positively, they often go on to influence others in similar ways. Your approach becomes contagious, spreading through networks and communities, creating positive change that multiplies far beyond what you could achieve through direct effort alone. This viral quality of positive influence is one of its most beautiful characteristics. By helping one person, you indirectly help many. By inspiring one individual, you set in motion a chain reaction of positive change that can touch countless lives. Understanding this multiplying effect should inspire us to take our influence seriously and use it responsibly. Every interaction is an opportunity to plant seeds of positive change that may grow and spread in ways we never see or imagine. The casual conversation with a stranger, the brief encounter with a service provider, the quick exchange with a colleague, all of these moments carry the potential for influence that extends far beyond the immediate interaction. This perspective transforms ordinary moments into extraordinary opportunities. When you realize that your behavior in any given moment might inspire someone to treat others differently, speak more kindly, work more effectively, or live more courageously, every interaction becomes meaningful. You begin to see yourself not just as someone pursuing your own goals, but as someone contributing to the larger patterns of human interaction that shape our communities and culture. The responsibility that comes with influence is significant. When people trust you, when they are open to your suggestions, when they value your opinions, you have the power to help or harm them. This power should never be taken lightly or used selfishly. The ethical influencer always asks, not just can I influence this person, but should I? And toward what end? The goal should always be mutual benefit, never one-sided gain at the expense of others. This ethical foundation is not just morally right. It is also practically smart. Influence that serves only your own interests is ultimately self-defeating because it destroys the trust and relationships that made influence possible in the first place. But influence that genuinely serves others tends to strengthen relationships and create even more opportunities for positive influence in the future. The person who uses influence ethically finds that their capacity for influence grows over time, while the person who abuses influence finds that their power diminishes as their reputation spreads.
In our connected world, character travels fast, and people quickly learn to avoid those who cannot be trusted with influence. The person who manipulates, deceives, or exploits others for personal gain may achieve short-term success, but they inevitably find themselves isolated and powerless in the long run. Trust, once broken, is extremely difficult to rebuild. Relationships, once damaged by manipulation, may never fully recover. The smart influencer protects their reputation carefully because they understand that it is their most valuable asset. The ethical use of influence also requires ongoing self-examination and commitment to growth. It is easy to rationalize selfish behavior when you have power over others. It is tempting to use influence for personal convenience rather than mutual benefit. The ethical influencer develops strong internal standards and external accountability to guard against these temptations. They regularly ask themselves whether their influence attempts are serving others or merely serving themselves. They also seek feedback from those they attempt to influence, creating safe spaces for people to express concerns or discomfort with their approach. They remain open to criticism and committed to improvement. They understand that good intentions are not enough, that impact matters more than intent, and that they must be willing to change their methods if they are not achieved. The development of influence without force is a lifelong journey rather than a destination. There is always more to learn about human nature, always new situations that challenge your skills, always opportunities to refine your approach. The master influencer remains a student, constantly observing, experimenting, learning from both successes and failures. They seek feedback from those they attempt to influence, asking what worked and what didn't, what felt helpful and what felt pushy.
The fondness to commit them to continuous improvement keeps their skills sharp and their approach fresh. It also demonstrates humility, which is itself influential. People are more likely to be influenced by someone who admits they don't have all the answers than by someone who claims perfection. The willingness to learn and grow makes you more approachable and more trustworthy. It signals that you care more about effectiveness than about ego, more about outcomes than about being right. The learning process involves both formal study and practical experimentation. Reading about psychology, communication, and human behavior provides theoretical foundation, but real skill comes from applying these concepts in real-world situations. Each conversation becomes a laboratory for testing new approaches and refining existing techniques. Each relationship becomes an opportunity to practice the principles of influence without force. The most valuable learning often comes from failures and mistakes. When an influence attempt goes wrong, when someone responds negatively to your approach, when a relationship is damaged by your methods, these painful experiences provide crucial feedback about what does not work. The person committed to growing their influence skills learns to view these setbacks as education rather than defeat. They analyze what went wrong, adjust their approach, and try again with greater wisdom and skill.